All right. Hi, all. Good evening, and welcome to the February and inaugural meeting of the 3C Planning, Zoning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us. I'm Commissioner Janelle Paggets of 3C03. I'm a co-chair of this committee along with Commissioner Tammy Gordon. Hi, Tammy.
Hello.
So we have a pretty short agenda this evening, being it's our first meeting of this, and we have not been able to appoint, a full slate of community members to the committee yet. So we're really hoping when we start engaging and really kicking things off, it will be more robust in the future. So highlights of a few of the things that we're going to cover this evening are a brief introduction on the scope of this committee, which is what we passed in the resolution in our January meeting. Outline of how we're looking at hoping to get community members to sign up to join the committee, with the caveat that we have not finalized the 3C rules yet, which would then really detail that process. Then we're going to discuss the Wardman Park large track review resolution that we will be putting together in the next couple of weeks to then vote on at the 3C public meeting. And then we have a request from the community member Bob Ward about commercial overlays in the historic districts. So we're going to give him a few minutes to bring that up to the committee. Just to note, no decisions are made at this meeting. So there will be no votes. There will be nothing decided. So with that, I'll turn it over to my lovely co-chair, Commissioner Gordon, to go over the scope of the committee briefly, and then we'll take some questions after that. So Tammy?
Sure. Thanks everybody for coming. So going to go over the committee and then how community members can join the committee. So the things that you would be working on if you got to be a part of this, and we certainly hope you will be, are identifying appropriate issues related to job creation and business development, including housing development and policy, as well as individual project development, sorry. Working with developers, project proponents, community-based organizations to encourage the inclusion of affordable housing, multifamily units, and community amenities wherever possible. Making recommendations to the commission regarding requests for zoning relief. Making recommendations to the commission regarding historic preservation review board applications for commercial, multifamily, and institutional projects. Researching and reporting findings and providing recommendations to the commission, tracking and notifying the commission of all relevant hearing dates, and being the primary interface between the ANC area and the Main Street organizations. So prospective committee members are people from the community. They're typically recommended for membership by their SMD commissioner after consultation with the committee chair. As somebody who feel like it was a gateway to ANC involvement, but it's something that, I did earlier in the last couple of years and worked on the transportation committee. So this is something I have some familiarity with. So if anybody has questions about how it works, feel free to message me. But the commission will take into consideration the diversity of representation of residents, including views and perspectives, and it may appoint to the committees. More to come after that, after we review and approve rules ahead. So turn it back over to you.
But in the interim, do feel free to reach out to your S&D commissioner or Tammy or myself to voice your interest, and we'll go from there. So the rules committee meets, another one that you can join. The rules committee will be meeting this Thursday via Zoom at 6:30 as well, and the information is up on our site. So with that, I'll open it up to questions from commissioners or the current only standing committee members at this point, and then the community. So if you have a question, you can put it in the chat, raise your hand virtually or, on the screen, and we can take questions. don't see any. So the other thing I'm going to do is link in the chat to the openanc.org site, where if you're not sure of who your commissioner is at this time, you can look it up there. Give me 1 second. And all right. I think we can move on then, unless any commissioners had anything else to say to that. Okay.
This commissioner has a dog that decided he needs to go out right now, so he's going to make a special appearance in this meeting.
Oh, hi, Ike. All right, so we will move on to the discussion of drafting a resolution regarding the Wardman large tract review. We had the meeting on January 26th, which the recording is available on our YouTube site, which I can post in the chat as well if you wanted to watch that. A lot of really good information was shared. I am going to turn this over now to Commissioner Prinzo, who is SMD, and he'll be taking the lead on drafting the resolution with the input of the rest of the commission and hopefully the community, because we are soliciting input for this. So please, email us your comments and concerns if you would like them included in what we're going to put together. So Commissioner Prinzo.
Thank you, Commissioner Pagets. So we are going, as Commissioner Pagets has stated, be drafting a resolution regarding the Wardman large tract review. As of right now, in consultation with some of the community members that I've heard from, the two largest things that we would like to address in this resolution are the potential for overcrowding at Oyster Elementary School. There is going to be a lot of new apartments coming into the area, and now is the time for DCPS to be looking at ways to remedy an already bad situation, in my opinion, at Oyster. So we will be asking for DCPS to look into ways to remedy such a situation when and this development opens. Also, our second biggest ask, or not really ask, I guess, but Carmel has made some concessions to DDOT regarding transportation in the region, and trying to entice some of its residents to take advantage of some of the public transportation that we have in the region, such as giving tenants who sign up Metro Rail brochures and smart trip cards. And I believe, if I remember correctly, they are also agreeing to put 2 Capital Bike Share docking stations on the property that will be accessible by the public. So we are also interested in hearing any other thoughts from the public on this. I'll turn it over to Commissioner Pagets.
Just real quick to note, Carmel hasn't really agreed to DDOT's comment
Correct.
on this yet. DDOT came back, and you can find their memorandum in the OP site that I posted in the chat. That they already came back with, what they're looking for due to the amount of car parking spaces that's part of this project. They're really increasing the amount of bicycle parking spaces, including e-bikes and cargo bikes, well above and beyond the minimum required. And so there's that, along with some other things. So I'll open it up to the standing committee members first, which are the commissioners. Do you guys have any questions, comments? I think most of you are at the meeting. No. All right, it looks like it's Rabel. I'll see if I can unmute you. Gilda, are you there?
Yes, thank you so much. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So thank you all for the opportunity to attend. I really appreciate this. To keep up to date, from when we had the last meeting, the sidewalk in which students like walk to school to get to Oyster was completely blocked with no signs that they had to like cross the street. I mean, this obviously affected pedestrians as well, but I feel like grownups are safe enough and know how to look out enough. But it was really disturbing to see that the sidewalk was closed, forcing them to walk in the street without any indication that they should cross ahead of time. It doesn't feel like there was any communication with the school. I spoke to the principal today.
I will say we are aware. There are signs out there now. Commissioner Pagets and I have been dealing with it since last Thursday, Friday-ish, and we are very well aware.
Yeah,
Okay.
I actioned it with like the top brass at DDOT, and they sent an inspector out Friday, and they are working on mitigating that as best they can. So they're working on either getting a Jersey barrier out there to provide that safe access, or getting flaggers, or any combination of those things. They do need to have that sidewalk closed off because obviously there's debris for
Yes.
a few weeks that are it's intensified on that side. So we obviously want to keep people safe, but are very well aware we don't want children walking on Calvert Street.
Yeah,
Yes.
agreed. Yes.
So we got on it and went as far up as we could, and they actioned it, at least getting out there, doing the inspection and starting the plan as to how they're going to safely mitigate this.
And I will say that I walked directly towards the fence without even noticing that it was closed because I was not paying attention when I was walking. So we're aware.
Yes. And then I guess a couple other things to add. In our letter, could we request the consideration for mixed use space? I know that they said that like they don't have to, but that, they could, I guess they have. So could that be a request for, for us to put in there? Because there is a great need. Like it would be great if there was a market that could be on the first floor, or, like some kind of gym. Like, there are certain things that we don't have in Woodley Park as it is. And to add that many more residents to an already strained neighborhood just feels like something that I'm sure the residents of their apartment building would use all of this. They would charge a premium on rent for being in such a great space, accessible by Metro to people who are coming from other neighborhoods. Like, is that something that you guys could please include in your long track review, I guess, debrief that you're putting together? And one more item is just the emphasis on communication with the school, because the principal felt more like every meeting that they have is more them just telling them what they're doing rather than really asking for any kind of input from the school, which feels like a complete disconnect from what they said in their meeting on the 26th. So just things that we can, hopefully work on emphasizing, as, they seem pretty important in my opinion.
Agreed. So regarding the use of their space for public amenities, like they will be having a gym and like space for their residents to use. But there's nothing that we can do to force them to open those things to the public, because this is not, you came to the right meeting, because we're going to talk about zoning overlays.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like there's zoning to be changed to like a mixed use retail so that they put retail space. No, I mean, I don't expect that they're going to open up anything to the public.
But that requires them, the owner, to then go through that process. And that's not something, it opens the project up to a lot of risk. It is something that the District of Columbia government can do in the future to change the zoning on our own accord, on the districts accord, and not require owners to have to go through that process. But we're going to hear a little bit later about the constraints that some of these zoning overlays have on things like restaurants and retail and things, even in that Woodley Park commercial strip and the Cleveland commercial strip. So it's not to like nerd out on, on
Yeah.
issues, but like it's not because the owner doesn't want to be nice to the community. It's just this is the regulation and the law that we're faced and the challenge that we deal with. The other thing to note is they did promise to keep that lawn, the green space in the front, open to the public.
Yeah.
And have that upkeep and care. So I think that was nice of them. Because I know that was really important to the community as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I guess, and I've been calling, you know, Matt Freeman's office to get kind of like a better understanding on who can help influence like where we are right now. I understand that the demolition was a completely separate project and nothing was needed for that, but this LTR is necessary for them to go forward. So again, sorry for an overabundance of questions, but I'm really just trying to understand at this point, what do we have the ability to influence? Because while I understand that housing is necessary, I feel like that housing that's going to come up is going to be extremely expensive housing that is going to take away from some of the older classical, you know, more historical buildings like that are in the neighborhood. And it's also going to put a great strain in our area. Like land is so hard to come by right here. And for it to be put like, you know, to build 900 more apartment buildings when we don't really, when we could use more things for our neighborhood is just really hard. It's a hard pill to swallow. And they were telling me something about like a study that was done on like zoning and population from like 2015. And that helped determine like the fact that this was tagged as like available housing. So I don't know, any background that you might have on that study or how that process works. Like I would also be extremely curious to know, and I'm happy to connect like offline if it's taking up too much of the time here, but I really am invested. Like I love this neighborhood and I've been here for a long time. I plan to be here for a long time. So I just want to help out.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up because we are actually also in the process of the Connecticut Avenue design guidelines. And that process started last year, where this is where the Office of Planning is looking into, you know, the future of the corridor and what it can look like regarding public space, regarding, you know, art, housing, retail, all of that stuff. And I'll put the link to this in the chat. You know, there's plenty of opportunity for public input on that. We're going to be running that through this committee too. So again, this committee's work will be, you know, focused on that project as well. And it's very exciting, and I'm glad that you're interested in being involved in it, because this is the bit that can fix where we are now, right?
Okay, great.
Cool.
Thank you.
No problem. Anyone else have question, comment? I'm gonna look this up for a second. So Tammy, if you can look for
Any hands? Just raise your hand if you have, either physically on camera or by using the icon, if you have a question or want to weigh in. I'm not seeing any right now.
Additionally, we will also accept comment, question, all of that via our email addresses. You can either email all, can somebody throw that in the chat? I'm still looking for the other thing.
I can
All
do
at ANC 3c.org
Yep.
or any one of our single member emails. And then when we put the agenda out for the public meeting, you will see a draft of a proposed resolution that, again, you know, that week when we have that notice posted in the interim, be great to hear from folks. on how we can make that resolution better. All right, it's last call for questions, comments.
Gilda, did you have another comment, or is that
Yes,
Great.
sorry.
Yeah.
Could you guys just elaborate on what additional information could go into your review of the LTR?
So, not having done this before. And it's also very rare within the district, this large track review. Unclear, but it's mainly comments to the district agencies about what we as the community think that they need to have their eyes on when they're doing their review of the project and they're planning and thinking about it. And then with DDOT, it was their comments were mainly on mitigating car usage and ultimately traffic, right? Because it is very strange that there is basically a 1-for-1 parking ratio in this project. But again, they're not being parking maximums in the District of Columbia. There's not a whole lot that one can do. Rick, sorry, Commissioner Nash.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Commissioner Pagets. You know, one thing I'd point out, and this is something that I believe the Office of Planning said at the community meeting. You know, this process, it's not a regulatory proceeding. You know, there is no permission or permit that is going to be, you know, on the line here that is going to result from this process. It's designed to be a holistic look, you know, at what could be a potentially impactful development from, you know, the standpoint of transportation, as has been pointed out, or for public schools, you know, or for other uses of the property. But ultimately, you know, this has been purchased by the applicants, and it's matter of right. So, you know, they can take into account the recommendations, and hopefully they will take in, you know, they will work with some of them, but ultimately it's not going to change their plan fundamentally unless the applicant decides to go in that direction, as I understand it.
Correct.
That's what was explained to me as well.
Okay. Anyone have any other comment or question on the Wardman? Alrighty. Looks like we can move on then to Mr. Ward and zoning fund. All right, it looks like you're unmuted.
Awesome. Thank you for giving me the time. I just wanted to raise the issue of, as many of you may or may not know, there is a zoning, it's called a neighborhood commercial zoning that the Cleveland Park area and Woodley Park area are covered by, and also I would say up at Macomb in Wisconsin. But I'm talking primarily about Cleveland Park here, and in those zoning requirements, there's a cap on how many eating and drinking establishments there can be. This was set up in the late 1980s. It was something that the Office of Planning suggested they be put into the zoning code when they were downzoning this after the historic district was created. They saw that San Francisco had something like this, and they thought it would be good to include it in our area. We've hit the cap a number of times over the last 3 decades. Enforcement of this really hadn't started until the 2000s, even though it was put into place in the late 1980s. But I think the point I wanted to bring up, and this is really for a future meeting, is to basically say, I mean, particularly after pandemic, but also just how our retail environment has fundamentally changed from when these regulations were put in, how things have moved online, and how sort of in-person experiential retail is what's driving the day. I think we should rethink the cap that we have in Cleveland Park, primarily because we're, stood up a Main Street, and one of its main strategies is to attract new businesses, including restaurants, to our commercial area. We're not at the cap now. We're close to it. If we were to be successful in marketing the new Cleveland Park, particularly after the streetscape is done, the last thing we would want to do is hit that cap and have to turn people away. And so what I'm suggesting is we start looking into this, maybe at a future planning, zoning, housing, and economic development committee meeting. You could bring in people like John Stover, who is a economic development consultant who was involved in Cleveland Park and did a 2016 study and did some operational implementation strategies in 2018. I think he has opinions on this. Bring in commercial real estate brokers. Steve Combs comes to mind at KLNB. I've heard him talk about this issue and how it's sort of like sort of a red flashing light to move people away from an area that have a lot of, sort of extra hoops and, whatnot that they have to go through. There are other areas that don't have this. And so tenants, want a path of least resistance. So anyhow, I just want to bring that up, and I hope this can be addressed at a future meeting. This is not, I think, a pressing issue at the moment, but as I said, I think it could be in the not so distant future. And then secondly, we're going through a planning process, and frankly, the retail consultants who are involved in the planning process may bring this up anyhow. But if the Office of Planning does recommend rezoning our commercial area, this is a zoning regulation, and so it has to go through the zoning commission. This is the time, I think, to address this in addition to our sort of height and density and design characteristics that will be part of a new zoning code as well. So maybe for the March meeting, this is something we could talk about.
Thank you. I have heard this surfaced a few times from constituents of mine as well. I'm right on sort of Macomb and Ordway. And, one of the things that I hear over and over is like the desire for better things on Cleveland Park Main Street, better restaurants, better quality businesses coming in. So I'd love to learn more about it. Obviously, I'm new to that. So happy to research and dive in, but I think it's a good topic for a future meeting.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would agree. We definitely don't want to have a reputation for creating a hostile business environment. So, and having vacant storefronts is definitely not ideal. Yeah. Commissioner Siddiqui.
I was just curious, Mr. Ward, if you know or if someone else knows if this exists in any other part of the city, and like what caps are like if they do exist.
It does. It exists in George Avenue. There's an NC zone that it has the restaurant cap. Tacoma Park has the restaurant cap. Certainly, as I mentioned, Cleveland Park, Woodley Park, and Macomb in Wisconsin are NC zones where this is included. There are NC zones, the most recent ones created. There's one down on just south of Barracks Row on 8th Street. I think it's called the 8th Street zone, southeast. Their cap is 50% of street frontage, whereas ours is 25%. So that is one of the newer NC zones. And then the NC zones that run along H Street Northeast don't have the restaurant cap at all. And that was obviously a positive choice that they made when they created those zones. I'm told that the NC zone that the Office of Planning is working on up in Chevy Chase will not have a restaurant cap. And so I think Office of Planning is sort of like on the ball that, you know, this is something that we're probably moving away from. But again, I don't want to speak to the other neighborhoods. My concern is Cleveland Park. It's what I know best. And so that's why I'm bringing this up. But I know Woodley Park is within, you know, 3C's boundaries, but if other people want to speak to that, that's fine. But it's going through the same process.
Yeah, the only reason I asked was, do you know of any place where it's been changed? So we could, you know, look at some history or some precedent or some following some ideas.
Not that any have been changed since being instituted, but as I said, the two, the 8th Street Southeast and the H Street Northeast, both created in the late 2000s, were the one, and they're the last NC zones that have been created in DC. Both have deviated from how the other zones had been created previously. So if there's a trend, the trend is moving away from it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Prinzo.
I also think this is a fantastic idea. Maybe this is a question that somebody knows or maybe not, but do we know why this was instituted for a specific reason, or is it just because we saw what San Francisco was doing and we liked it? Or
yeah, I mean, essentially that is it. So as I mentioned, in the late 1980s, there was a downzoning that happened in Cleveland Park and Woodley Park, and this happened like the year after the historic districts were created in the commercial areas, and both are contained within the historic district. So there was a whole zoning case that went into this downzoning, and this was introduced in that process. And it was, I think, introduced by the Office of Planning. And I don't think it originated organically. In fact, at the time, if you go back to the case records of that zoning commission case, there was only 14% of the street frontage in Cleveland Park that were occupied by eating and drinking establishments. And so they were setting this cap at what they thought would be probably an unbelievably high level of 25%, which was met within the next 15 years. And, you know, the reason for the cap that people have subsequently defended it is, and these are like quotable, you know, we don't want Cleveland Park to turn into the next Adams Morgan, you know, to be a destination that is completely full of eating and drinking establishments. Obviously, the market for retail has changed in DC dramatically. There's so many other neighborhoods throughout this city that are destination places for eating and drinking establishments that, you know, didn't exist back when these regulations took into place. And then what people go out for, you know, we had a lot of really cool shops back in the 80s along our commercial corridors. And like everything else, you know, online has changed how we do business. And so the viability of some businesses just aren't there. But the in-person experience is what every retail consultant will tell you is what still, you know, brings people in. So whether it's like a cute store like Femme Fatale, but also has events and you want to go there and experience it, or restaurants or, you know, bars, etc., that, you know, you want to go in and have a social experience.
thank you.
Commissioner Nash.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out a couple of things, and it's important again to understand why the overlay was created, and maybe some of those same factors are still relevant today. And then there are others that, you know, reflecting a trend more toward experiential retail or commercial experience, you know, should be taken into account to review what is appropriate. But while there was an overlay put into effect that that did align height and in density with the sort of prevailing building character of the historic district. This neighborhood commercial overlay was, I think, motivated by something else. And I think that's shown by the fact that you see this NC zone in other neighborhoods other than Cleveland Park and Woodley Park, including Macomb, Wisconsin, which was not an historic district, and where that overlay, I think, was basically changed by the PUD that was put into effect there more than 10 years ago. What I understand motivated it was, as Mr. Ward said, a bit on not, trying to avoid an overconcentration of restaurants and bars, but that sounds more negative. It was motivated by wanting to see a diversity of neighborhoods serving retail, so to include restaurants and bars, but also other stores, as well as to reflect the fact that there are different retail uses, like stores and shops that may do more of their business during the day, and restaurants and bars that may do some lunch trade, but tend to be more at night. And reflecting the fact that while we do have a metro, our businesses have also cited, including restaurants, the need for customer parking and valet to serve their needs. So the intent was to provide a bit of diversity of neighborhood retail, from restaurants to businesses, but also, I think, to smooth out some of the effects and ensure, say, that scarce street parking could be used for shops during the day and in restaurants more in the evening. It's not to say we shouldn't take a look at the caps, which are not an issue now, but could be. But it'll also be important when we do this review to understand some of the factors that motivated it, and whether those are still important and vital today.
Thank you. Mr. Goodman, representing Woodley Park.
Sorry, I have to interject a Woodley Park perspective here. Bob, I don't have any problem with anybody taking a look at the regulations that are now 30 years old. We ought to take a look at these things all the time. But just a couple of factual observations. We're talking about the cap. It is not a hard cap. Woodley Park has over 33% of the storefronts as restaurants. All you have to do to to get even more is to go through a special exception process. Now that's a pain. Obviously, it's not overright, but it is not impossible. And the Nando's restaurant that we have here now, got a special exception within the last 8 years, I would say. So, blessed as I said, it is not a hard cap, and in fact, it's a pretty easy cap to get around if anybody wants to. I don't know what the situation is in Cleveland Park, but we have a number of vacant restaurant storefronts in Woodley Park now. So there is room for new restaurants, even with the cap and without having to go through the special exception process. When a restaurant closes, that site continues to count as a restaurant. So the next occupant can come in and operate a restaurant there, even if they're already over the cap. And we had discussions with the zoning administrator years ago about this, and he said that's the only way they can handle this. Obviously, Woodley Park in the 80s and 90s had a different concern than Cleveland Park, because we then had two great big hotels, and they had a lot of people who would go to the Woodley Park Strip and eat. And of course, the restaurants didn't have to be very good because their customers only came once. But that was part of the motivation, I think, for the restaurant cap in Woodley Park then. No longer true with the closure of the Wardman Park, but that was part of the motivation to keep the the restaurants under control, so that there would be opportunities for other kinds of retail. And I don't know if the Cleveland Park they called it overlay in the olden days, it's the same as it is here, but there are also caps on other things which don't make any sense, like banks and travel agencies. Have you ever seen a travel agency in the neighborhood? Not in probably 30 years. So yeah, I think that these regulations are due for a new look in light of the fact we don't have travel agencies anymore, among other things. And the restaurants, eating establishments ought to be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do feel like even though Woodley Park has lost a hotel, right, that they seem to have opened more new restaurants by far than what's been happening in Cleveland Park.
Yeah,
So
we have a friendly rivalry in Cleveland Park is losing.
But that's been interesting to watch happen with my view from the disputed territory living between the two.
I think we're
No
also
dispute.
getting better restaurants.
It's gonna be a great committee.
Amazing.
Any-
Anybody else want to weigh in? I think like we've had some really good discussion here. I think much more discussion, of course, ahead. But if anyone else has anything to weigh in on. Barbara?
Thanks for letting me attend this meeting. I don't actually live in Cleveland Park. I live, I think, a block or half a block north of the boundary at the corner, near the corner of Upton and Connecticut.
We'll still let you visit.
Honorary. Yeah.
I am so interested in this conversation about restaurants because I miss Al Volo so much.
Oh, me too.
That beautiful bar. But I'm really upset and really obsessing right now. I should back up and say that I'm also a co-leader in the WIN, Washington Interfaith Network, Ward 3 congregations, affordable housing group. So we're working on affordable housing kind of all throughout Upper Northwest. But I personally am really interested in this conversation, thinking about Van Ness, the area maybe from Van Ness, maybe north to Albemarle. There is so much unused, empty, underutilized space. And I'm wondering, your conversation is making me wonder whether some sort of overlay or cap that exists with respect to Van Ness, because nothing seems to be happening around here at street level to make, to create a nice neighborhood. So I just wanted to make that comment. I appreciate what you're saying. I did discover, and when I was looking into Howard University Law School property, which is just west of two or three doors west of my house on Upton Street. And over the years, my neighbors and I have been in touch with them about what their plan is. Not been very productive discussions for various reasons, but in the course of working on that project, I found an overlay there, which some of you may know about. It's called the Forest Hills Overlay, Tree and Slope Overlay. And I did a little interesting, some research on the OP website or on the Zoning Commission website about the history of how that came about, how the neighbors banded together, neighbors in Forest Hills, mostly east of me, and then north into Forest Hills, banded together to get that overlay in place so that nothing would happen there. And of course, a lot of really bad things are happening there right now with the Allen Mercer Daniel Law Library, which is falling into ruin, and the trees are all dead. And so it remains to be seen. I know that our new council member has his has that in his sights, that site in his sights. Anyway, so this discussion is very interesting to me, and I appreciate you all sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to go to Tom next.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hey.
I just wanted to chime in. I'm really interested in this topic. It's maybe the foremost advocate for a coffee shop in Cleveland Park. Of course, I thank you. I'd really hate to see anything stop new business from coming into Cleveland Park, particularly those restaurants, et cetera, that are, I think, at the moment, sort of driving business here. When we have a great restaurant open, people travel across the city to do it. You saw the 100 best restaurants list just come out last week to great fanfare from Washingtonian. And so I think, just to add my voice in, I think it'd be really great to take a look at that cap and hopefully raise it, if not eliminate it, just because I don't want anything to stop business from coming to our neighborhood.
Thank you. Any other folks want to chime in, hand raising, or make yourself visible and raise your physical hand?
Oh, Luke had a question in or comment in the chat about Adams Morgan having a cap on liquor licenses that was recently removed. So that's a bit different because that's a moratorium on approving new liquor licenses. Has it been lifted yet, or is that still going on and people are just... I went to an ABRA hearing on one that was on the border of it, and it was incredibly 12 hours of spiciness. I know there was talk of lifting it, but yeah. But that's definitely different than what we're talking about with the zoning maps.
Yeah, my understanding was that the moratorium had ended, but I'm not as familiar with the legal underpinnings of that. And I don't envy you going to an ABRA hearing.
I was just thinking the same thing.
It was a very interesting case, and I didn't stay for the entire 12 hours. Somebody that was actually being paid to be there was like, you should check this out. But yeah.
Yeah, generally, I think the idea of raising the cap or eliminating it makes a lot of sense and should definitely be part of the consideration.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think it is necessary or a good idea or best practice to revisit some things that are, 40 years old of rules and, might need a little dusting off. So thank you, Mr. Ward, for bringing this up. We have 9 minutes left. If anybody else has anything they want to, put in front of us for future idea, question, comment, concern, things you want us to look into out of this committee, now's your chance. Mr. Ward?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just because I had a conversation with the Office of Planning not that long ago, the process that's going on looks like it's going to produce a draft report either in late March or early April. And then it's going to be out to the public for public comment and engagement. So I just thought I'd pass that along. You guys may already know that, but it's sort of an exciting time because they've taken in all of our surveys and feedback they gathered in in-person sessions and all the walks and everything else that happened, and are, working now on putting it together. So it looks like April and May are going to be pretty heavily public engagement opportunities to get the community to comment on what they've come up with. That's
And
it.
the Connecticut Avenue design guidelines,
Development and design guidelines. Yeah.
because we have to have so many words in every single title. Thank you. Yeah, and that is the publicinput.com link I put in the chat. So sign up for the updates. I think OP sends out a newsletter at least once a month, if not every other week. That's pretty robust and interesting, with all things going on in the Office of Planning. All right. Last call, Commissioner Gordon, do you have any last words?
No, I'm just very impressed and excited that we had a meeting that lasted under an hour.
And very interesting conversation too.
Yeah. No, thank you to everyone for joining. I hope some of you will consider, reaching out and potentially joining the committee or talking to neighbors about doing the same. We certainly want, to have more voices, and very excited to have some of these conversations ahead.
And even if you don't want to join the committee, these meetings are always going to be open for the public for engagement that we welcome, encourage, and hope to have more of. So, if the commitment to committee membership is not something that you want to make quite yet, again, join us every month. Your co-host will be here.
Thank you, everyone.
Just want to especially thank Commissioner Paggett and Commissioner Gordon for such a great meeting. Thank you both so much. This is great.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. And we look forward to your Transportation Committee meeting coming up on Wednesday.
Oh, they're always fun.
Always.
All righty. Well, with that, thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Bye.